The 2020 WWE Draft is done and complete. And like every draft, there's winners and there's losers. We got Josh Tariff here. We got Steve Kaufmann here. Of course, I want to cut to you guys. Josh, I know you had some excellent picks in our predictions video. But now we're going to talk about our winners and our losers. But of course, like I mentioned, I want to know who your winners are for Raw and SmackDown.
Well, I mean, getting 4 out of the 5 Raw predictions correct is, I'm a winner in that regard, I think. And so I deserve a nice honorable mention. Plus an honorable mention to the writing teams of Raw and SmackDown, since they don't have to come up with anything new because they just transfer storylines to other shows. So I definitely think that is a plus. But in realistic winners, first off, one winner was my curveball prediction, and that was Elias. Elias came back with a bang, setting up this feud with top babyface, new Raw edition Jeff Hardy, bringing back the story of him getting hit by a car. He's got an album coming out. He's going to have a concert next week. All of a sudden, this guy goes from being gone for 4 some odd months, and he's one of the top heels immediately on Monday Night Raw. So I think that is a huge win for him.
Or some of the other.
We're in agreement.
I don't know if we were just going back and forth. You want me to just list all my winners?
Just list all your winners.
We'll keep going. Because how about him being a top heel in Raw? Well, now SmackDown's got their new top babyface in Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens is definitely a winner for SmackDown. He can go right in, feud with Roman Reigns if they chose to. But, of course, what I want to see, and I'm sure what everyone else would love to see, is we bring back Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn feuding. It could be for the IC title. It doesn't have to be for the IC title because they work so well and have such history. It can work with or without the title. And now when you have other people that have left SmackDown and have gone to Raw, Kevin Owens immediately jumps in as one of, if not the top babyface on the show. Another big winner that I have, and this one might surprise people, and I'm not happy in saying it, but Lars Sullivan. Because all of a sudden, Lars Sullivan, who last week I joked on wondering why he was still on WWE.com, because I didn't even think he still had a job, all of a sudden now becomes the only monster on the SmackDown roster. There is no Bray. There is no Braun. There is no Keith Lee. Dabba-Kato is still Raw Underground and all that. So he's really the type of monster that can dominate people on SmackDown, which can coincide with a feud with Kevin Owens. Or I think it'd be, honestly, an interesting kind of feud to see how Lars Sullivan can do with a returning Daniel Bryan down the road. But Lars being the monster, the freak, as much as I don't think anyone really wants to see him do much right now, he's in line for success on SmackDown.
I'm actually going to go a bit out of order to talk about Lars Sullivan. I have him as, and specifically SmackDown drafting him as a huge loser here. There's no way we see him by There's no way we see him by Friday.
We're going to see him right. First off, he's already got a match on Friday, so I don't know why you would even say that. But I do kind of want to focus on one of your winners. Is I heard a huge groan when you said Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn feuding with each other, and that wasn't from me, because a lot of people are wanting something new. We've never seen a babyface Kevin Owens going up against a heel Sami Zayn. So I am all for that feud, for title, without a title. It's a new element that we haven't seen before. So, yes, I do agree with your Kevin Owens winner, and not only a winner of the draft, but going over to SmackDown to face Sami Zayn. But also, I feel like Kevin Owens is one of those guys that always goes back and forth in every single draft.
Kevin Owens, Apollo Crews, Natalya, every year they just bounce from show to show. Why? No idea. But they seem to be some of the ones that they're just like, yeah, you know what? We're going to put you on this show again and see what happens.
Before we get into Steve's winners of the draft, do you know the only person that's only been on one brand?
Oh, wow. That's going to be a tricky one.
Going back to the not original, but to the 2016 WWE Draft, do you know the only person that has never switched brands?
So over the last 4 years, the first one that popped into my head, which I could very well be wrong, is Carmella.
Do you know, Steve?
Carmella seems pretty safe. I want to say Heath Slater never made it to Raw since 2016 where he went undrafted, but if he went undrafted, it probably doesn't count.
But he's also on Impact now. But I'm going to say Josh. I'm gonna say Josh is the one that's FABULOUS, even though she might not even use that theme song anymore because apparently everybody's switching theme songs these days. But yeah, Carmella's and still the only one. She got drafted by SmackDown. But yeah, she's still the only one to never switch brands. So that kind of says I don't know if that's a good thing for Carmella or a bad thing. But Steve, who are your winners of the WWE Draft 2020?
So my third pick was Kevin Owens, but we both agree that was a huge winner, specifically SmackDown for getting him. But I have a huge pick, a huge winner from this draft, and that is Mercedes Martinez. Because she was quietly let go from Retribution. She's reappearing in NXT as Mercedes Martinez. She is going to get that stink off of her, and she's going to get to be a locker room leader in NXT. She's going to get to do great work. And a month from now, we're going to forget that she was Retaliation in Retribution, which is a good way to just confuse people as a name. My number one winner from all of this is the Raw brand for signing both The Fiend Bray Wyatt and Alexa Sister Abigail Bliss. I think these two are money, and they fit everything what the Raw brand should be. My other winner is the SmackDown brand for picking up Bianca Belair. They are going to have a much stronger and younger women's division after they lost Sasha Banks and picked up Bianca Belair. Bianca Belair, if I want to say the last...
Sasha's still on SmackDown.
Sasha didn't go to... Okay, then never mind. I swear I do the research, guys. They drafted Sasha to SmackDown. It's confusing. We were talking about how confusing it is.
They drafted them to their own shows.
Bianca Belair is going to do great on SmackDown. Those are my winners.
I do agree with your Bianca Belair, but how are you going to pick somebody who did not even get drafted? How is your number two going to be somebody who did not even get drafted?
You talking about Mercedes Martinez?
Yes.
That's a huge win. Now, in her case, going to NXT was one of the biggest wins of the weekend.
Is it a win? Because NXT, which we've discussed on this, has by far the deepest women's division. So by her going back to it, I don't know if that necessarily helps her.
To be the elder stateswoman of one of the best women's divisions in wrestling, I think that's a perfect spot for her. Instead of being Retaliation on Retribution,
I'm not saying she should have stayed in Retribution. There's a lot we can say about Retribution, which we'll probably get to more in a moment.
But if that's all they had for her on Raw, then that's where she's got to go. Like, NXT is the better move. I'm standing by that pick.
I'd rather get more money and be able to not live in Orlando. That's just my opinion.
They all live in Orlando.
What was your guys' opinion?
Where do you think the Thunderdome is?
Well, I mean, you can still live anywhere you want if you're in the Thunderdome. But I do want to ask, because we mentioned Bianca Belair, which pretty much spoiled the fact that Street Profits were going to go on SmackDown. Just really quick before I get into our draft losers, what were your guys' opinions on the, I guess, exchange between Street Profits belts and the New Day's, titles?
And I mean, this kind of segues into partially one of my losers, which is just tag team wrestling. Now I have more specific example in my losers, but with that, we are really at the point in WWE where the men's tag titles should be like the women's tag titles, and there should just be one pair that goes from show to show.
I agree.
Because they've decimated so many teams. So this should have been Adam Pearce letting them know. It's like, hey, I know you guys were talking about the title switching, but this is what's happening. Hell in a Cell is going to be Street Profits versus the New Day to unify the tag titles. Ziggler and Roode can show up angry because they thought they'd get a title match. Cesaro and Nakamura can show up because they're pissed they want a title match. And they can have matches on Raw or SmackDown to try to earn their way in to that match. But should have just been unified with them just being like, oh, yeah, we're switching titles because they're exactly the same. So it's really no big deal. Just one's red and one's blue. Really, how many slaps in the face in such a short span can a WWE do to tag team wrestling?
If there were ever a company that would go for the record, it would be them.
Right?
It was bad. I think this is as focal a moment as an 11-year-old boy winning the Raw tag titles as ever to this is a perfect time to just let them go away.
He was 10.
Was he 10? Oh, I'm sorry.
He was 10.
But they have enough tag teams. They could have a strong tag division across 2 shows, and they're choosing to have 2 weak to mediocre tag teams on 2 tag team divisions on 2 different shows, and it's so frustrating to watch.
Do you know the person that's responsible for the most for AEW's existence?
Who's responsible the most for AEW?
AEW's existence.
Wouldn't that be the Young Bucks?
It's Vince McMahon. Because if Vince McMahon gave a crap about tag teams, the Young Bucks would be in the WWE. If Vince McMahon just wasn't so focused on people that his view of what should be successful, Cody Rhodes would not be in AEW. So it just WWE can have anything and everything that they want. It just baffles me why they choose not to. Your thoughts to my strong statement.
We're all in agreement. We're preaching to a choir. I don't know which of us is the preacher.
But specifically, Vince McMahon is responsible for AEW's existence.
I mean, WWF and WWE is successful because of Vince McMahon.
Correct.
So you have to take the good with the bad with that. That company is 100% him and his image. So you can't blame him for sticking with what brought him to the dance, so to speak. That said, he goes out of his way to hire very, very smart people pretty much just to tell them no when they give him the advice.
And then along with that is the fact that, if Vince didn't buy out competition, then other competition wouldn't try to get in and find more alternatives. So if there was regular competition and Vince just focused on his own show, then we'd have even more wrestling shows on TV, and maybe some would thrive and some would get canceled. But that would just be from their own merit, not because of Vince.
Well, we're gonna spend a year of AEW. We're gonna see how that goes. It's going pretty well so far. But Steve, I want to get into I know you mentioned a little bit earlier. Who are your losers from the 2020 WWE Draft?
So the only brand I see that's not true. My first brand that I see as a loser, Josh would have said it if I didn't. It's Raw. They drafted Retribution. The Retribution, those characters, that group, as written, want to destroy wherever they work. Why would you draft them? They should go undrafted.
I rarely agree with you, but I 100% agree with you. Yes. Why would anybody draft Retribution, especially so high? You have Mickie James, you have the Lucha House Party that did not go drafted, you have Andrade that did not go drafted. Why would you draft Retaliation if they are strictly there to destroy your brand?
See how confusing that is? You just said Retaliation when you meant Retribution.
Right. But then also throw in the fact then, why didn't Retribution try to destroy the draft?
Ali wasn't even there. I wanted to hear from Ali.
Right.
I think we're all in agreement about Retribution. I'm happy we brought it up as one solid point. It's been made very clear every week that Retribution was a thing they made up without any intentionality for a finish. And every week they have a different finish in mind, and then every week they change that finish. So Retribution is the Lost of the WWE universe. There, I said it. My next loser, we talked about this a bit, is SmackDown drafting Lars Sullivan. I think where there's smoke, there's fire. And I don't see a world where there's not more trouble publicly with this guy.
And I hope you're right.
I
really hope you're right.
Because I think the screenshots of the DMs that came out recently, that was a lady who I believe sells yoga pants or she sells yoga lessons. That's a pretty innocuous exchange. You mean to tell me that's the only thing he's done in the last 6 months that's going to get screenshotted and come out in the next 2 weeks. I honestly do not think we're going to see him on TV this Friday. And
who wants to bet? We can make a bet right now that he shows up on Friday.
I'm not going to take the bet on Friday, but by the end of October, I don't think he'll be on TV.
You just completely changed your.
No,
he's not gonna be there on this Friday. But I won't bet that he won't be there this Friday.
I bet you by WrestleMania 40, he's gone.
No, by the end of October, he will be off television. I can't say when people he's been harassing in one way or another are going to send their screenshots to the world. I'm not going to bet on that. But I think we're all in agreement that if he doesn't wind up on TV, he's a bad pick. And I don't think he'll wind up on TV. Speaking of being on TV, Keith Lee is my third loser. Not him personally, but he was drafted 8th on the second night. This is the man who was supposed to square up with Roman Reigns. This is the man who beat Randy Orton clean. This was supposed to be everyone's savior. And it's not him personally, but it's where they clearly see him, that they're drafting him 8th on the second night.
Just to be clear, just to make it worse, 13th overall. 13th overall. And I know, just to be fair, you said second night, but there's one group of people that got drafted on the first night. Mm-hmm. There's another group of people that got drafted on the second night, but still 13th. So, I was going to say retaliation again. Retribution got drafted over him. Lars Sullivan, obviously, Matt Riddle, Kevin Owens, Jeff Hardy. A lot of controversy with the Matt Riddle stuff. Maybe we'll get into it on a different show. But Keith Lee, your number one, you thought he should have been drafted higher then?
I thought he should have absolutely been drafted higher because I think he should absolutely be a top contender for your world title. And that's where you should see him in the next 60 days. And if you don't see that in him, you shouldn't bring him up from NXT until you do.
That's not fair.
Well, to kind of go with what Steve's saying, because I partially agree with this, is the fact that, okay, we thought last week the Braun Keith Lee stuff was just kind of going to be a one-off to help sell Braun on Raw or the draft. But they kept emphasizing, oh boy, Braun's going to be excited now that Keith Lee's on the same show. They're building a feud with Braun and Keith Lee. So my question on that is, someone's got to lose that feud. And this is a lose-lose situation because you got one guy who just lost a title, who isn't following any type of rules. If he loses, where the hell does he go? Then you got the other guy who debuted with a big win, no contest, falling on the card based on just the way they were looking at him. So one of them is going to plummet. So putting both of them on the same show, I felt was a terrible mistake. But crazy enough, that didn't even make my list.
I don't know. George gave me a bit of pushback, and I just want to clarify. Keith Lee is a top guy in your territory.
He's a top guy, but just because he doesn't get a world title chance in 60 days doesn't mean he's going to be a failure.
I didn't say a failure, but I am saying if you...
Well, you're saying if you don't have plans for him within 60 days, then you obviously no.
He's a top guy. He is the guy you put atop your territory. They have 3 territories. He's already atop of one.
WWE is a marathon. If something doesn't happen today, it's okay. It might still happen in the future. Kofi Mania was way more special because of the 11 years that he didn't get pushed. Imagine if he would have won 2 years afterwards. It really wouldn't have been as special as what we saw at WrestleMania 35. It's not the end of the world if they don't give him that huge push within 60 days. That's all I'm saying.
It's not about whether or not they give him that push in 60 days. It's clear that they brought him up from NXT without any plans to give him that huge push to make him the top guy we all know he should be.
That's not just him. That's a lot of people from NXT.
I know, but they don't always draft the co-holder of the North American and NXT champion draft or bring up at the same time. I don't know.
I do agree. With that said, I will say, knowing that he was pretty much the only kind of dual brand champion, he should be a bigger deal based on those accomplishments. Josh, I know you were going to mention your 3 losers of the 2020 WWE Draft.
Yes. So my first loser, kind of going back to what I was talking about a little earlier as far as tag teams, specifically Heavy Machinery. Because what the hell is going on here? So for the last 8 months, it has been Otis and Tucker, Otis and Mandy, Heavy Machinery and Miz and Morrison, lawsuit, Money in the Bank. Now, everything that I just said, except for Otis, is on Raw. So why is it being completely dropped without the final payoff? And now you have Otis where, many people would say, well, he's got the Money in the Bank briefcase, so he'll be fine. It's just like, not necessarily. Just because he's got that briefcase and he's a lovable guy doesn't mean that we can take him seriously to cash in on Roman Reigns, to cash in on Seth Rollins, to cash in on whoever the champion might be at that point. So I remember saying from the very beginning when Heavy Machinery made their main roster debut that Otis reminded me of like a 2019, 2020 Santino Marella, Scotty 2 Hotty, lovable fan favorite mid-card guy that you can have fun with, maybe get mid-card title reigns. But now you get rid of his best friend, you get rid of the girlfriend, you get rid of his rivals, all in one fell swoop. So now we're left with nothing for Mr. Money in the Bank. And it ain't about to cash in on Roman anytime soon.
Just to let you know, we're talking about draft order. Nothing against her. She's improved vastly. But Dana Brooke drafted higher than the men's Money in the Bank contract holder. Throwing it out there.
It's true. Another one of my losers, for very similar reasons, is the Lucha House Party. Now, Lince Dorado and Gran Metalik are still together as a team, but for the last 2 months, it's been building for the dissension between all three of them. Now, Kalisto is by himself on SmackDown, and Dorado and Metalik are on Raw. I thought this whole dissension was eventually going to build up for Gran Metalik to have the singles push of the three, because he was the one who got the match with AJ Styles. He was the one that had the match with Cesaro, etc. So all of a sudden, again, we're throwing that to the wayside. Kalisto kind of turned heel, but now are we just forgetting that it happened? And to me, it's just very unusual because you could have had a triple threat match at a pay-per-view that would have stolen the freaking show with those three guys. And now we're getting absolutely nothing with it. And then finally, my other loser is a group of people, and that group of people would be Andrade, Bo Dallas, the Forgotten Sons, Mojo Rawley, and Mickie James. Why? Because Titus O'Neil was drafted and they weren't. Titus O'Neil has wrestled twice in the last year. One of those being on Raw Underground.
First ever 24/7 champion.
And he's a former tag champion. I get it. And he's very well spoken. He's a great ambassador of WWE. I'm not putting him down whatsoever. But can you imagine if there was an actual arena full of fans and Stephanie McMahon went up there and like they're waiting for these draft picks, maybe a surprise from NXT, maybe someone else they're waiting on, and then she announces Titus O'Neil. Do you think anyone in 2020 in a live arena would have been like, worldwide? No, they wouldn't have done a damn thing. So it's just like all these guys, all these people. I know Forgotten Sons are who knows where they're at. But Andrade, Mickie James, one day they might do something with Mojo Rawley, but he's certainly a higher draft consideration than Titus O'Neil. So those. I also had Retribution on there, but Steve already took care of that.
I think we took care of that pretty well. Jackson Riker is off TV for tweeting some stuff in June.
Right. But so Steve Cutler and Wesley Blake obviously get guilty by association.
I'm not saying it's right. I don't understand why, if you have a supplemental draft on your website, you can't, why anyone should go undrafted unless that's the gimmick like Heath Slater 4 years ago.
Right.
Just draft everyone. Put them there. Like, put the Forgotten Sons on SmackDown just so you put them somewhere. They never turn up on TV until you're ready to turn them up on TV. And if you want them on Raw 3 months from now, it's not like you take this that seriously.
And even with Heath Slater, they turned that into a fantastic storyline that culminated in, him winning the tag team championships with Rhino. They were the first SmackDown tag team champions. So it was one of those where, yes, he went undrafted. People thought, oh man, that sucks for Heath Slater. but it turned out pretty well in that span of Heath Slater's career.
I couldn't tell you the final pick of the 2016 WWE Draft. I could tell you that
it was Carmella.
Okay. Carmella. Y'all were on top of it, but like
Carmella's pretty much a trivia answer for anything that we mentioned today.
Yeah, that's fair. And first woman eliminated from a Rumble. Yeah.
And then also with the tag teams and everything, one other thing that I completely forgot to list. So Jey Uso was drafted to SmackDown. Naomi was drafted to Raw. Hey, who's Naomi married to?
I don't know.
The other Uso.
the ChristianReports.com and me thinks that there's some maybe inner turmoil maybe between Jimmy and Naomi. I don't know. I'm not instigating anything. I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying I did think that was a little weird that one of them went to SmackDown, the other one went to Raw. We haven't really heard much of Naomi and Jimmy Uso these days. Not saying anything. Just throwing it out there.
You're not saying anything, but you just said it.
Just throwing it out there. I mean, I'm not. Again, I don't know anything. I don't have any inside scoop or anything like that. Just throwing it out there.
All right. Well, again, tag teams have been destroyed.
I mean, it's nothing new. It's nothing new either.
Well, which is saying something because tag teams were never a strong suit over there.
Right.
So for them to even further,
I wouldn't say never, but definitely not anytime recent.
In my adult life, WWE never did tag teams right.
That's true. Because I was saying 89-90. Don't give. I want to do a separate show on
Survivorship.
When was the best year for tag teams in the WWE?
That's a good show.
Tune in next time. We're going to find out.
It was around that time for sure. And ironically, with all these winners and losers, we have yet to mention the New Day breakup.
I think that's actually creative gold. They're not broken up forever. Big E didn't turn heel. Like, you just shelved the 3-man group to make a 2-man group and then a 1-man group. I like it.
I'm just worried because this Friday on SmackDown, they're supposed to have a New Day farewell thing. And I'm just terrified
that Big E
could turn heel and attack him at the end of the show. I pray that doesn't happen.
I would hate that because do you want to know what time of year you could have done that? Any time of year. It's draft time of year. You draft them to separate them to make Big E not turn heel on them. You don't just get to do both. That's a waste.
Yeah.
I just got to say, I got to agree because Bianca Belair is going to be a star. I think she's going to sign on SmackDown. SmackDown already kind of has, I haven't seen the full list yet, but their women's division is a little depleted. So Bianca Belair, because I know Lacey Evans went over to Raw. But again, I think give me an over-under. How many months before Bianca Belair is SmackDown Women's Champion?
4.
You're going to take that over? You're going to take that under?
4 months. 4 months. I would say by Rumble, she's champion.
I think she wins the Rumble.
And that could very well be the case. So.
I think she's white meat babyface heading. If you're not going to do Banks, well, if I'm going to fantasy book, Banks Bailey doesn't need a championship, so you need to find a way to get the championship off of Bailey onto another heel so that Bianca Belair can be the white meat babyface heading into WrestleMania for that. And then you also have Banks. And you have Sasha Banks and Bailey at WrestleMania. But my fantasy booker hat is off. That's a different show.
Mm-hmm. You heard it here first. Not only will Bianca Belair win the Royal Rumble, according to Steve, you will not see Lars Sullivan on SmackDown this upcoming Friday. But if anybody wants to get at you, Steve, where can people find you on social media?
They can find me on Twitter almost exclusively. I'm at Steve Kaufmann. That is Kaufmann. I am heavily involved in the pro wrestling YouTube space. And if I'm tweeting a link, chances are I'm involved.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Josh_Tariff. Please let me know how much more you agree with me than everything that Steve said on this. I mean, I was the guy who got more picks correct in the draft, especially 4 out of 5 for the Raw brand.
I also got 4 out of 5 for the Raw brand, but whatever.
Nah, mine were better. And though, if you want me to settle your debate, you can hit me up on Cameo. That's right. I'm doing a plug just like Big E used to do before they kind of had to stop. But yeah, hit me up on Cameo. You want shout-outs, you want me to do any announcing, or do you want me to settle a debate that you might have with your friend? I'm happy to do so.
Hey, it's Christy Olson. If you like this video as much as I did, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends so they can join in the Wrestling Chatter too. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow the show on Twitter at TW Chatter. See you next time.